But we're going to be talking about Spurs' current form recently, because there's been a lot of talk about Spurs' form. We have been getting points, but the narrative around the form is that we're not on good form right now. We'll start with you, Royce.
If you went on social media, you'd think we'd be losing 8-0 every week?
I think we're in a relegation battle. But Royce, we'll start off with you. Do you think, how do you look at the Spurs form? Do you think we're on form, off form, or is it somewhere in the middle?
That's a really good question. I think when you compare our recent performances compared to the beginning of the season, you may say, no, we're not in good form right now. But when you consider the entirety of recent performances, it's clear for everyone to see that when we're at our best, we're able to put together really beautiful moves in the system. And even with the Fulham nightmare that I don't want to think about anymore, the Premier League just recognized Ange for this morning for a Manager of the Month nomination. So, that leads me to believe that we're not obviously on the worst form in the world. I know you guys spoke on your 5 takeaways against West Ham. Sim, you went through the stats about how we play better when we go a goal down. And so that made me curious to look at our stats of when we had scored 2 goals in general. When I went and looked back through all of our games this season, we've actually only lost 1 time against a team when we've scored 2 goals. I think I said that right. Yes, we've only lost 1 time, and that was to Brighton at the end of last season at the MX. So, like you were saying, Ben, it would have been a completely different game if we were able to get that second goal in the first half against West Ham. Vicario's been a proven shot stopper, whether the attacker has been offside or not. But when you consider some of the goals that we've conceded, especially in the most recent game, it's obvious that set pieces are a huge problem, like a lot of the Spurs community has alluded to. I think it's a little bit naive of Ange to not have a set piece coach currently. And that in combination with Harry Kane obviously no longer being in the squad, you can remember how deadly he was and how much of a threat he was on corners and set pieces. So taking that out of the squad obviously removes that danger aspect. But if I was Ange, if I was him, I'd be on the phone calling up Giovanni Vio immediately to enlist his services, the set piece coach from last season.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it's hurting us too much now that we don't have a set piece coach, not just from a defensive aspect, but I think from an offensive aspect as well. Like, we need to be doing better from set pieces all round. But Sai, what do you think? Do you think we're a team on form, off form, somewhere in the middle? Are you happy with the way things are going at the moment?
Yeah, I think it's somewhere in the middle, mate. To be honest, I think one thing or 2 things we kind of got to analyze here is the sense that obviously the beginning of the season was absolutely fantastic. So I think there's a lot of comparables to that. And I think it's typical of Spurs fans in general. We always tend to just cling on to those kind of things and expect that to happen all the time. Yeah. I don't massively like, as you know, the kind of injury excuse too much, but the fact of the matter is we're a relatively thinned squad, to be honest, if you look at it in detail, that when those key players do go out, it will become very problematic for us. Whereas those other sort of like top 3, top 4 teams can very much look at their bench and have some really good replacements come on, matching that ability or higher. So I think there was always going to be a bit of an area of a form dip. And I think some of those injuries, I think people maybe don't understand the injuries themselves, but Maddison, I know we'll talk about him in a bit more detail later on, but Maddison's injury was quite a complex one, as was, of course, Mickey van der Ven's with the hamstring. That's a terrible one to pull. It's a very hard one to come back, especially if you're a fast player. And Bentancur's one as well. I mean, he had a double whammy. So what you've got there is not necessarily, I would say, a dip in form because the players aren't good enough. I think it's because most of the players that have been coming in and out or back from injury, they're kind of expected to just be back to how they used to be immediately, when actually this just not the way it works. So they're all trying their best. Bentancur has come out very recently and said, openly on national duty that he has a major injury still, but he's playing through it because he doesn't want to let everyone down, this, that, and the other. And I think
Ange says it's not major. He's got 9 other toes.
It 100% is. And that the kind of injury that he had, and he even came back from earlier in the season, is substantial. It changes you as a person. It changes you as a player. It makes you think differently. And it's not singling any players out at all. We just got to have a bit of an understanding that these all do play a part in that form perspective. And I think that, aside from that, from the games that I've certainly been going to, that middle of the park has been inconsistent in itself. It's almost like we don't know the coordination, the combination of players that we need to put in there. And yes, the players should be good enough to just come in and do a job, but ultimately that does affect the rest of the team. We saw it over many seasons, playing with some certain players in defence or wherever those positions might be in midfield, that affects the trustworthiness or the confidence in the rest of the team to go, actually, I don't really want to pass it to him because it's probably going to come back to us in 5 seconds. And it's that kind of mentality. So, when Van der Ven's back in, it makes things a lot stronger. And I do think, to build on that, what we had at the beginning of this season can only really be seen next season, in my opinion. I think this season is just so transitional. And we didn't want to expect things. We were told not to expect things because everything went so well in that 3 or 4 month period. We got our heads set in it. So that's kind of why I think we're in the middle, but we also need to understand the complexities, like all the things that externally or the variables that are occurring as to why that might be happening, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with that. And I'm looking at maybe our form since the turn of the year, since January. We've lost 2 games in that period in the Premier League, which was obviously the Fulham game and the Wolves game. And when I'm looking at the wins aside from that, obviously I'm taking the cup out of this. So we drew against Man United, which was probably quite a positive display. 3-2 against Brentford, which I thought we weren't that good that day, but we got away with it with that 10-minute spurt at the beginning of the second half. Everton away was up and down. Brighton at home was okay. Wolves at home was terrible. Palace at home, I think, was very dominating. Villa away was obviously the best of the lot. Fulham away was probably the worst of the lot. And then you've got Luton at home, which, we dominated them, but we probably should have created more. And then West Ham away, which we dominated them and probably should have created more as well. So I'm looking at those kind of run of games, and I wouldn't say it's good form from a results perspective. I would say it's good form, but I think from a performance level, I think it's been fairly patchy. What I would say. So I think when I'm always trying to judge form and judge results and everything, I always go back to the first 10 games of the season, because that was like a sample size of maybe what Spurs could be like with the first 11 being back fit. And when you look at it, since we've had our first choice defence in this season, I don't think we've lost a game with Mickey van der Ven, Kuti Romero, Destiny Udogie and Pedro Porro, which is unbelievable to think about. And where would we be this season if we didn't have those kind of injuries? So I'm happy with the way things are going. And I think for Spurs to be showing these kind of patchy forms is kind of expected, isn't it? Because I think the first 10 games wasn't expected with the way a new manager coming in, losing Harry Kane and all the kind of facets that go along with that. But with us getting the results, I think it's a very positive sign. Only 2 losses since the turn of the year. So I'm happy with what we're showing, but I think with the first 10 games of the season, if you look back at that, you still expect more in that kind of sense in terms of a performance level. Where are you at with it, Sim?
I think for me, because even if you take from the turn of the year, we had the Asia Cup, we had the AFCON, we had more injuries in that period as well. So there's been a lot of destabilising moments. I'm looking at since the end of February, so the last 5 games essentially, since everyone I feel like has been back, had a little bit more time. I do think our form has been generally good. I've been pretty happy with how we've controlled games, how we played, barring that Fulham game. I thought Palace, we played pretty well. I definitely think we deserved to win that game. I don't think 3-1 was an unfair result. Villa was brilliant. I thought the Luton home game, in my opinion, we should have won that by 4 or 5. We had the chances to win that. 2 miraculous events in that game, 2 1 in a million events somehow meant we didn't score more goals in that game. And I think the West Ham game, on Tuesday, I for one didn't think it was such a bad performance. I know we should have created more, but I think people have gone way overboard on social media about how bad we were in that game. We dominated them pretty much the whole game. West Ham, obviously, look, West Ham was a very difficult game, especially given that we're their main rivals as well. They have that extra motivation. We saw not even that long ago, a couple of weeks ago, Aston Villa went away to West Ham and struggled badly, and that was a very different performance to our performance. They should have lost that game. West Ham dominated them and had loads of disallowed goals and should have won that game at least 2 or 3-1. We went there and we controlled the game for 90 minutes. We were camped out in their half for a lot of the game, and as unfortunate we didn't, after going in the lead, we obviously gave it up in a real bad fashion with a poor goal from a set piece, and that killed our momentum a bit after a really fast start in that game. But I still think in general that those kind of performances is kind of the learning curve you're going to get when you're up against a low block, right? And you're asked, that's obviously one of the hardest things to do in football. That's why teams play a low block, because they know it's very, very difficult to break down. And not just that, it's going to be a team like West Ham who are very good at doing that. There are teams who sit a low block but aren't good at doing it, but West Ham aren't one of those teams. They're always tough to play against for most teams as well. So obviously, it was a disappointing result and a frustrating night, but I didn't think the performance in general. I thought we played a lot of good football on that day, and actually it went under the radar. Obviously, the one really bad performance was Fulham away. That was inexcusable. That was a really, really shocking display, and it took everyone by surprise, especially as it was a week after beating Villa away from home. But I do think in general, as our players have come back, as we've got a fully fit, the squad is now fully fit, more fleshed out, we've got more options off the bench. I do think our past 5 games of form has definitely improved. I do think we are playing quite well at the moment, and it's made me more excited going to these last 8 or 9 games of the season, rather than when you look on the discourse of social media at the moment, after a result where we don't get the win, everyone acts like it's a disaster and acts like we're playing really badly. I see even people saying, is it like we've been bad all season? Is anyone enjoying the football at all under this manager? What is, like, are we playing good football? All this kind of rubbish. Like, I don't understand why people are going so overboard. I think where we are in the process at the moment, if you compare where we are in our first season compared to a lot of the top managers at the same time, we're well ahead of where a lot of these managers were in terms of the process we're on at the moment and how far Andrew's gotten. And even in the patchy form, like, it's not, even in those patchy games that you're talking about, we still in those games have really great moments where we're on top and playing good football. Unfortunately, we can't sustain it for a lot of those games for 90 minutes. But that is the process. The process is sustaining it for 90 minutes. You're not going to get there straight away. You're not going to, a lot of the times, you're not even going to get there in the whole of the first season a lot of the times. I remember under Pochettino, very rarely we had a 90-minute performance in that first season. I remember that was that Chelsea game we won 5-3. That was like one of the only times in his first season where we had like a real dominant performance in his first season. And then it comes with refining of the squad, with more time on the training pitch. All this stuff will come. But I'm looking at our last 5 games. I actually do think we're on pretty good form. I think we are playing well at the moment, and I think people have this narrative, Villa, they went down to 10 men. Luton, we had to score a late goal to win. Palace, we struggled. We had to score late goals to win. So it creates this narrative that we were struggling in those games. But in my opinion, I'm watching those games, I think we deserve those victories. I think we are playing well. And I think people need to realise that it's always going to be a work in progress, but the form we're actually on is pretty good in my opinion.
Yeah, Royce, do you think it's maybe down to because it's not as free-flowing as it was earlier on the season, and maybe coupled in that Spurs fans do have major PTSD when they look back at previous tenures? Conte started off on fire, then dropped off dropped off massively. Mourinho started well, dropped off massively, and all these new managers that seem to come in start well. Even Nuno, we won our first 3 games and then dropped off massively. So do you think it's to do with that as well?
Yes, I definitely think that previous managerial experience and how that their form has fallen definitely plays a factor in that how Spurs are feeling about our form right now. I think when you consider the players that Ange has brought in, and when you think about the players that were at the club when he came in, I wrote it down quickly. I mean, Werner, decent squad option at the minimum. Solomon, can't judge. Phillips, promising prospect. Valise, promising prospect. Vicario, unreal player. Dragusin, you can't really judge yet. Van de Ven, no explanation needed. Madison, no explanation needed. And then Brennan Johnson's on unreal form right now. So to me, he hits way more on players than he misses. And I saw as well on social media how right now we're 3 points away from our point total of last season. I know last season isn't the standard by any means, but I feel like if we just give him 2, 3, 4 more transfer windows, we really could be in a great spot and be a lot closer to where the majority of the fan base wants us to be.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I'm so happy with Angela. I can't believe all I see on social media. I see it in our chat sometimes, being Ange out, Ange is clueless, Ange is this, Ange is that, and I'm like Ange is doing a great job. Like, we lost people don't. I think people don't actually realize how much of a big factor it was to lose Harry Kane on the eve of the season, and not only that, brand new way of playing. The starting 11 is unrecognisable from last season as well. They've never played together, the majority of these teams. To get Mickey van der Ven to slot in as quickly as he has done and be one of the leading defenders in the Premier League, I think it's all unbelievable. And to say that we haven't lost a game with our first choice defence as well, I think it's unbelievable work from Ange. So I think when you're judging the form, I think we're on good form. I don't think we're on unbelievable form. And I think there's still so much more to come from this team, which is the exciting thing about it. I'll let you have the closing words on this topic, Si.
Yeah. Well, it's to your words, mate. I think, Ange is going to be and is a fantastic manager. Again, back to my point, you can't click your fingers. It's not going to be immediate. I love Sim's point, actually, and you guys know full well I've sat at train stations after games and depressed moods from what I've seen in front of me, and the audacity of players that get paid a lot of money to not turn up when I'm spending 3 or 4 hours each way getting to the ground every other week. And what's great, and my dad and I have spoken about this many times, is even if we've lost games, which is obviously really annoying and depressing at most times, you come out of the stadium going, we gave that a good go. And there were elements of the game that were really good. Exactly to Sim's point. If that wasn't happening, I would be majorly concerned, because hang on a minute, we got a new batch of players. That ticks the massive box in loads of supporters' minds, because we've been like, still got the same team from like 5-6 years ago, blah, blah, blah. Albeit now Son, I think, is the only one left, and Ben Davies, obviously. And, it's appeasing the fans again, but then we're back to square one of that same situation we've seen season after season after season. So I think that final remark of everyone really is exactly on point, in the sense that we have to give those extra windows. We have to believe in the project that's ahead of us. I think we're on the right direction. I want to see form, obviously, every supporter does, but I'm also always, if you relax your mind straight away, I'm going to give you guys some zen out there right now, because I've been doing a lot of physio and psychological stuff at the moment, in the sense that if you have in your mindset accepting where we are as a club right now, we all know where we want to be, we all know where we should be, but right now is where we are. If you can get that in your minds right now, you won't be as stressed. And I know you guys have to use social media, but I quit that many years ago for many reasons like this, where there's too many arguments, too many crazy things going on. Just chill, guys. Like, Andrew's got this. We're going to have some incredible new players coming in the summer, hopefully. And I think we're going to enjoy even better football than we've seen this year. And who knows, we may challenge next year. It may be too early, but look at Klopp. Look at all these managers that came in. It never happened really instantly. And fans just have to be a bit more patient. But that's the beauty of support, is you get a mix of emotions, mix of balance, opinions, and that's the greatness about football. And I think it's just, as I said, keep a chilled mind, accept where we are, and it will be a lot easier for everyone out there to not get so stressed about it and realize actually we're on a really good path here.
All right. Nice.